It'd be interesting, I mean, we'll never know, but how he felt coming away from that. Like you said, he was due to give evidence tomorrow. It was brought forward a day early. It was expected to be a full day. He only got a couple of hours. Rory, what are the tactics at play here from a legal point of view?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot has been made of the fact that yesterday Anthony White-Casey for Associated Newspapers was supposed to do opening statements for 2 days, and he only did 2 hours, which pushed Prince Harry into the box a day early. And this is a technique that can be used to try and rattle a witness. And then today, interesting that they only cross-examined Harry for 2 hours. Now, in my experience, if you have a witness on the ropes, you keep going. He was due to be cross-examined for a day, and they took him out. They pulled him early, because I think Harry was doing well, actually. Now, I think what a lot of people think about Harry is that he's a playboy and he's not very bright, but actually, he's intelligent, he's articulate, he's genuine, he comes across genuinely, and also he knows these issues inside out. He's lived this case, and that makes, in my experience, for a very compelling witness. And I think that although there were no hammer blows landed by either side today, I think Harry held up well enough that they thought, this is damaging to us. And he said a few things. For example, he said, I feel like they were trying to drive me to drink and drugs to make more press out of me. He talked about the misery inflicted on Meghan and started choking up. This is the kind of emotional stuff that cuts through to the public. And I think maybe there was a tactical decision by Associated's lawyers that this isn't going well, we should pull him out early so he doesn't do any more damage.
The mood inside the courtroom noticeably shifted the moment Prince Harry stepped down from the witness stand earlier than anyone had anticipated. What had been framed as a drawn-out, intense interrogation instead came to a quiet close after only a few hours. And almost immediately observers began asking the same question: why end it there? From a legal perspective, that question isn't trivial. When a witness appears uncertain, defensive or overwhelmed, opposing counsel usually leans in harder. You apply pressure. You probe for inconsistencies. You don't voluntarily shorten your own opportunity. That's why this moment matters far more than it may seem on the surface. Prince Harry had been scheduled for a prolonged period under questioning. The expectation was that he would face at least a full day of cross-examination, following opening arguments that themselves were expected to stretch over multiple days. Instead, those opening submissions concluded much sooner than planned. As a result, Harry was called to give evidence earlier than anticipated. That change in schedule was not accidental. In courtroom strategy, altering the timeline is often used as a way to destabilize a witness. It interrupts preparation, throws off mental pacing, and forces someone to respond before they've fully settled into the process. The goal is simple: catch them off guard and hope mistakes follow. But in this case, that tactic didn't produce the desired outcome. Legal observers, including media law specialists, have pointed out that what unfolded next was likely not what the defence expected. Prince Harry did not falter. He did not appear disoriented or flustered. He didn't unravel under pressure. Instead, he remained steady, focused, and deliberate in his responses. That alone changes the entire calculation. From the outset, Harry presented himself as composed and engaged. This was not someone struggling to recall distant events based solely on documents or legal summaries. This was someone speaking from direct experience, recounting years of personal impact. That distinction is crucial. Cross-examination is often most effective when a witness relies heavily on paperwork, hearsay, or second-hand accounts. In those situations, it's easier to expose gaps or contradictions. But when someone is testifying about experiences they personally lived through, especially experiences involving sustained stress, intrusion, and psychological strain, the dynamic shifts. The testimony carries weight because it's grounded in memory, not abstraction. There is also a broader context here that cannot be ignored. Prince Harry has long been portrayed in certain corners of the media as impulsive, unserious, or intellectually lacking. Those stereotypes did not survive close inspection inside the courtroom. What emerged instead was a witness who demonstrated clarity, familiarity with the details of his case, and a strong grasp of why those details mattered. That combination is not helpful to the opposing side. In fact, it can be dangerous. When a witness understands both the emotional reality and the factual framework of their claim, it becomes far more difficult to destabilize them. Observers noted that there were no dramatic gotcha moments during the questioning. No major contradictions were exposed, no decisive blows landed that shifted momentum in the defence's favor. But that absence speaks volumes. In legal proceedings, if opposing counsel believes a witness is weakening their own case, questioning usually continues. Pressure is applied until something gives. Here, the opposite happened. The questioning was shortened. What had been framed as an extended confrontation became relatively brief. That decision alone suggests caution. Because while Prince Harry was answering questions, he wasn't simply defending his own position. He was doing something else entirely. He was putting a human face on the consequences of media behaviour. And that carries influence beyond technical legal arguments. At one point, Harry spoke about the impact prolonged press intrusion had on his mental well-being. He described the sense that pressure was being applied deliberately, almost as if personal distress itself had become a commodity. The idea that breakdowns, mistakes, or visible struggles could be provoked and then turned into profitable headlines. That framing matters. He wasn't speaking in theoretical terms about journalism or press culture. He was describing what it feels like to live under constant scrutiny, knowing that vulnerability may be rewarded with further intrusion rather than compassion. That kind of testimony reframes the issue from a dispute over legality into a discussion about harm. Then the focus shifted again, this time toward his wife. When Prince Harry spoke about the effect media coverage had on Meghan, the tone reportedly changed. He described the stress placed upon her, the isolation and the emotional toll of relentless negative attention. For a moment, the courtroom wasn't just hearing from a claimant, it was watching a husband struggle to maintain composure while describing what someone he loves endured. Emotion like that is difficult to manufacture. It either feels genuine or it doesn't. And according to those present, it landed as authentic. The emotion was restrained, not performative. There were no grand displays or exaggerated language. Instead, there was visible effort to stay composed. That restraint is significant. Highly theatrical testimony can sometimes undermine credibility, but controlled emotion, especially when it surfaces despite attempts to remain measured, often has the opposite effect. It signals sincerity. Judges and legal professionals don't evaluate testimony solely on factual accuracy. They assess credibility, consistency, and tone. They look for signs that someone is speaking from lived truth rather than rehearsed narrative. In this case, the emotional moments appeared grounded in memory rather than exaggeration, and that made continuing cross-examination risky. Every additional minute Prince Harry remained on the stand gave him another opportunity to reinforce his account, another chance to articulate impact, another moment where empathy could outweigh skepticism. From a defense perspective, that creates exposure. Continuing under those conditions can backfire. Instead of weakening the witness, Further questioning may strengthen their case by amplifying moments that resonate beyond the courtroom. So the decision was made to stop, not because the task had been completed, but because the balance of risk had shifted. This wasn't about Prince Harry delivering a dramatic victory. It was about him refusing to crumble under pressure. Sometimes resilience itself becomes the message. What makes this particularly notable is how sharply it contrasts with long-standing narratives about him. For years, he has been depicted as emotionally volatile or lacking discipline. Yet, in this setting, he appeared calm, informed, and self-possessed. That contrast did not go unnoticed. Legal analysts observing the proceedings noted Harry's familiarity with timelines, evidence, and the structure of the case. He wasn't simply repeating talking points fed to him by lawyers. He demonstrated an understanding of what was being alleged and why it mattered. That level of engagement challenges claims that this lawsuit is symbolic or performative. It suggests intention. It suggests seriousness. He wasn't lending his name to a cause from the sidelines. He was actively participating. Another important point raised by legal commentators is the misconception that intelligence in court looks like emotional detachment. In reality, some of the most effective witnesses are those who combine clarity with sincerity. Prince Harry did just that. He answered directly. He acknowledged uncertainty when appropriate. He didn't attempt to overstate his case. And when emotion surfaced, it appeared tied to specific memories rather than vague grievances. That balance is difficult to maintain, and it's one reason escalating the questioning may have felt unwise. Pushing harder risked amplifying the very elements that made his testimony compelling. This case also doesn't exist in isolation. It's unfolding at a time when public awareness around media ethics, privacy, and accountability is evolving. There is growing sensitivity to the human cost of relentless exposure. Harry's testimony tapped directly into that shift. By explaining how intrusion affected his mental health, his behavior, and his marriage, he reframed the issue. This was no longer just about alleged misconduct. It became about lived consequence. That reframing transforms the case from a technical dispute into a moral conversation. And once proceedings move into that territory, outcomes become less predictable. That may explain the decision to exercise restraint. There were also no clear inconsistencies exposed during his time on the stand. Cross-examination is designed to surface contradictions. When none emerge, its effectiveness diminishes. At that point, continuing may do more harm than good. Legal analysts were direct in their assessment. If you believe a witness is weakening their own position, you don't stop early. You stop when the witness begins helping themselves. And that appears to be what happened here. Prince Harry didn't need dramatic revelations or sharp exchanges. He simply needed to remain steady. By doing so, he altered the narrative. By the time he stepped down, attention had shifted. The question was no longer whether he could handle pressure. It became why that pressure was withdrawn. In legal settings, silence can be as revealing as argument. Early exits rarely occur without reason. What this moment reveals may not determine the final outcome of the case, but it does illuminate something important. It shows how preparation, authenticity, and lived experience can reshape expectations. It also highlights how outdated caricatures fail under scrutiny. Prince Harry was not exposed. He was not overwhelmed. He was not discredited. Instead, he was consistent, credible, and composed enough that the opposing side chose not to press further. That decision speaks for itself. As the case continues, the impact of his testimony is likely to extend beyond the courtroom. It contributes to a broader reassessment of his public image, not as a reckless figure, but as someone capable of confronting powerful institutions with clarity and resolve. And perhaps most importantly, it reinforces a quieter truth. Credibility isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about showing up prepared and refusing to break. In that moment on the stand, Prince Harry did exactly that. And the fact that the fight was shortened may be the clearest indication yet that he was winning that particular moment.